times. Queer times. Queer times.
Kristen.
Hey, Kristen, welcome to Queer Times.
Hi, Harrison. Thanks for having me, as always, every single time.
Every time.
Every time. We love it. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
How was your week?
Well, it was 4th of July week this past week in Provincetown, and that is Circuit Week in Provincetown, or something.
Many abs.
Yeah, Circuit Week. Like, I don't know if everyone knows, like, circuit gays are, like, typically, like, abbed up, very in shape gay men who do the gay circuit, is what I understand.
All the parties at all the big resorts.
And what it has turned into, in my eyes, in Provincetown, is a lot of muscled up bodies coming together to touch other muscled up bodies.
And are you pro or?
I'm whatever.
You're whatever?
I'm not going to yuck their yums. If they want to eat protein powder all year and spend an hour and a half at the gym every day so that they can touch other people who also do that, go you.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
It is also that it's that crowd, and then it's also American families.
Yeah.
Which is an intersection that you would think some people would be more afraid of, but not around here.
And I don't know how far it got in the news. I know it got at least to the Boston news channels, but there were a couple of hate crimes in Provincetown this past week. There was an incident where a young gentleman was walking home from a club, so it was about 1:30, and a car pulled up, 3 men jumped out and beat him up while yelling homophobic slurs. And then a day or two later, there was another group of 3 young men.
Henry and Ryan and an unnamed underage minor, who I would like to point out, and this is the thing that I don't think homophobes realize about our community, is you stick out like a sore thumb.
Oh, yeah.
They were zooming by on scooters, and I literally laughed in the one dude's face because he had his American flag shirt on, and it was like, this is my pride shirt. That was like his...
And I'm kind of like, work.
Yeah. Now?
Right.
Now you're... But it was so funny because you can literally like see who it is, and it is my understanding that there might be a connection between the two incidences.
Well, the second incident was them coming down the street and basically air horns, hooting and hollering, homophobic slurs at people. They were apparently staying with their family slightly up Cape, and they clearly just came.
They took their daddy's car to Ptown to blow air horns
and
at
call
the
people
gay.
faggots. Like okay.
Tell me you have a little dick without telling me you have a little dick, Henry.
And it's just also one of those things, I'm just like, it bothers me that it happened, but it didn't bother me. You know what I mean?
The only thing that bothered me is that no one beat the shit out of them.
No, literally.
That's I just kind of feel like you tread lightly. You can think it's cute and fun to yell slurs at people and, sticks and stones will break my bones, etc. But the queer community is under attack right now, and we've literally gone way the fuck out of the way to mind our own goddamn business. And if you want
literally gone literally to the
as far as we can go, and if you want to come out here with your childish bullshit because mommy didn't hug you or whatever, God help you. People underestimate how much our friends work out.
Literally, I was just talking about those muscles, and like that's when I will start to yuck their yums. If you're doing all that work on those muscles just to have sex with other muscled up gay guys, at least beat up a homophobe.
At least beat up a homophobe with those muscles.
Yeah. No, someone was posting online who was like, if you're going to be out late at night or walking around alone, you should carry an air horn. So if this happens to you, you can alert other people and create a ruckus and draw people's attention to it. And I'm like, what about a gun instead?
I'm not against it.
Right. And I know we're supposed to be the side of when they go low, we go high, but I don't subscribe to that.
I don't think
I make homophobes afraid again.
Yeah, I don't think it's about going low or high. I think it's about defending oneself. Now, personally, I'm a gun, yeah, maybe, but I'd much would rather a good old-fashioned ass beating. Because then you live to tell the story of how you got your ass beat by some fags. And that we love. We love it because that is a way to use your experience and teach others about how it could go wrong if you're homophobic for no reason. And turns out them boys are strong.
And as much as it's such a bummer that these incidents happened in Provincetown, it was nice to see how the community came together. And
it was handled like that, though, too.
Oh, yeah.
They had the car figured out and... there's not much you can do for yelling names, but there is something you can do if you happen to find out that you're connected to that other car that was here. If it was maybe your other friend's dad's car that you drove to town, the black Lexus with the Trump sticker, they'll probably find that out.
One other thing about 4th of July week besides the muscle up gays, I think they should just stop calling it circuit week and call it like people who can afford it week.
People who can afford it?
Yeah.
How much is a hotel room that night? Or like a night?
I have no idea, but I know like some of these larger houses, like there was a conversation in town about like short-term rentals and how they should be limited. And I got, I guess, a little too mouthy for someone of my
income level.
Yes.
Tax bracket.
Yeah. On what? I think their direct quote was, "Who is he to have an opinion about this?" I'm like, well, I'm someone who's lived here for 10 years, worked here for 10 years. And the thing is like, I understand in a seasonal community, in a tourist community, short-term rentals in homes are important and part of our economy. But with the boom in Airbnb and other rental type websites and apps, it's gone haywire in the balance. So many homes, you can point to any home you point to, most of them had people living in them for at least the full season 10 years ago.
Yes.
And now it's just like everything is a short-term rental. Restaurants can't stay. Like it is a rarity for a restaurant to be open 7 days a week simply because they don't have the staff. And like, when does that bubble burst? Like, is your 6-bedroom house worth $20,000 in June if there's nowhere to eat on a Wednesday night?
All right. Anyway, but what we were going to talk about today.
Let's talk about a few things happening in the news.
There was a lot of breaking news.
Yeah, there's been a lot
of things that should make you feel proud to be an American.
So this past week, starting on July 4th to July 7th, there was a huge heavy rainfall in a part of Texas, mostly Texas Hill County, especially along the Guadalupe River in Kerr County. There was up to 20 inches of rainfall in some areas, which triggered massive, massive floods. 10 to 15 inches fell in just 4 hours, and the Guadalupe River rose by 26 to 29 feet within 45 minutes. Obviously, that is going to be catastrophic in any situation, especially to homes along the river, roads that cross the river, things like that. And I will say, I think there's one thing, having lived in Provincetown and by the ocean, there's one thing that I have learned, and it is like water is so much more powerful than you will ever. If you don't approach it being like, this water is so powerful, you're underestimating it.
It always blew my mind that people would be like, oh my God, you're from Buffalo, it's so cold there. And I'm like, listen, snow is the easiest natural disaster to tend to. You shovel it out of the way. Like that's literally, like it's freezing water is so much easier to deal with than rain and flooding and et cetera.
Just don't drive in it.
In snow?
Yeah.
I mean, we used to have enough weather forecasting at this point in our evolution as human beings to know that, like, if number one, and a thing I love about being from Buffalo is you do appreciate a moment where you're just like, you know what? We're not doing anything today. We're going to get a 6-pack of beer and we're going to hunker in and we're going to have a snow day, and that's fine.
Yeah, but I remember one time living in Provincetown, we were walking along the breakwater, which is like a jetty, and people had been drinking, and I was with a group of about 20 people, and someone jumped in the water, and the water was like slightly wavy, a little rambunctious. And they're like, oh, I'm going to jump in and swim and then climb back out. And then we watched them just get like slammed into these rocks until 3 of us climbed down and were able to drag him out of the water. Like if he was alone and thought like, oh, we'll just take a little dip.
Damn.
He would not have been okay. Just like, that's one thing I want to say is like, always respect the power of water. There was I'm not to digress and get too far off, but I just read this article about these 3 hikers that were hiking and it was really warm. So they're like, oh, there's a waterfall. Let's jump off the waterfall. And they jumped off the waterfall and never came back out.
I think the part that I hate about all of this right now, because obviously now the number one, people are dead.
Yeah.
And we hate that.
There were over 100 fatalities that have been confirmed. There are still missing people. There was 87 people in Kerr County and more than 28 children there. And I don't want to say most notably, but a lot of the press has been around this camp called Camp Mystic, which is an all-girls summer camp by the Guadalupe River. And them alone, they lost 27 staff members and campers, and there are still campers and staff members missing that haven't been recovered.
So the Christian camp was smited by the Lord? If it were the other way around.
Yeah, totally.
If we had a little LGBTQ camp by a river and then it was flooded, I bet you they'd be like, that was the Lord.
One thing I try not to do, even though it is so tempting, is to like use their logic against them, because their logic isn't sound. As much as like, yeah, they would have said that, but like I try not to be like, well, God must have, because that's not real.
No, it's not real. And I think that like I've been trying to figure out, was it about the National Weather Service funding being cut. For every story that says it is, there's another story that says it isn't.
Yeah.
And we're entering this age of will we ever really know? And now, Chuck Schumer wants a probe of the National Weather Service response in Texas. And I'm kind of like, is Texas asking for that, Chuck? Like it's becoming this nonstop. They said, she said, he said, they said, back and forth with no real answers, no real science, no real anything. Because on one hand, you can say, is this because of funding cuts with the National Weather Service, and did we not have enough meteorologists, and have they launched, there's a viral clip going around right now about the guy who's quitting being a weather person because there have been like a 20% decrease in like the weather balloons that get launched that are giving us data, and so like we're getting less data. Or are we on the verge of record-breaking storms that are happening because of the climate situation that people have been talking about for decades at this point, and we'll never know what it is, but we do know that we're not prepared ever, it seems, to handle a major disaster, nor are we particularly functional in the aftermath of it all. Like what's happening in the Carolinas and Asheville from last year, we're not. There's
still people missing.
Yeah, but we have a concentration camp. We built that lickety split. It almost doesn't matter to me the why or the how. The reality is we're not prepared for crisis when it happens. We're not helping our people. People are dying more often than they should. And we have all the money in the world, and yet we can't seem to solve that problem in this country because all the money in the world is in the pockets of like 10 fucking people.
I do think there are cuts to the National Weather Service, which as we approach this climate crisis, or as we dive further into our climate crisis, I think that is very worrisome. And I do think there will be situations in the future that are caused by these funding cuts to the National Weather Service. But in my research, as I was looking at the story, it seems like they did know this was coming. Basically, when the meteorologists find it coming, they let someone know, they let someone know, they let someone know. And where that chain of events did break down was in this area of Texas, there is a vacant position in their weather services of basically like an emergency alert person. So a person who's in charge of that last step of getting the alerts out to people. That's where it broke down. There were limited nighttime alerts and insufficient local sirens, which is what people said. There should have been sirens. I know we've done it where your phone goes off and it's like no matter if it's on do not disturb, it's going to disturb you.
Yes.
Which is great. I think
I got one of those I was on the road in Mississippi and there was a tornado and I got one of those. Like, yeah, those are very common.
There have been over 850 to 1,000 rescuers that are using boats, drones, helicopters, finding people who have survived, unfortunately locating bodies of the people who died in this event. The economic losses are estimated to be 18 to 22 billion.
Billion?
Well, you also have to think like bridges.
Right.
Bridges, homes, infrastructure, roads. There are still thousands without power. But then there's part of this next, then the aftermath. And then you look at FEMA cuts. President Trump has cut FEMA. We're unprepared in a monetary and structural sense to respond to these things. There are not the levers to pull to get support to these places. I watched a video of a woman who owns an RV camp along the river, and she was like, there is about 40 RVs all smashed together with people inside them.
Right.
And she's like, and we've had not a person to show up to help.
Well, now it's about states. Right now it will be on the state of Texas to deal with that. And now we'll see how our federal government is actually going to operate.
Right.
Will they suddenly find money for the state of Texas to help them out of the situation because Texas is perceived as a pro-Trump state, a conservative state? Will it work like that?
Yeah. And also in the news this past week, and this is it's so hard to say troublesome because everything is troublesome lately, but Trump was somewhere and said oh, I hate Democrats. I hate the Democratic votership. And that's a new thing. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize it because with Trump in the last 10 years has brought so many more voices into politics and the coverage of politics. But there used to be an understanding that once you were elected president of the United States, you were president of every citizen within the United States and not the people who supported and voted for you, and everyone else gets fucked.
Yeah, no, these are unprecedented times. And it is the thing that is now emboldening people to just want to hate each other.
Yeah.
And like me included, honestly.
Yeah.
It's definitely
tough.
hard at this point. I'm not saying it's all like them.
Yeah.
And that we're not feeling it. No, we're all feeling it. And more, it's a challenge to want to rise above and take the high road and do all those things when there's an onslaught of how terrible queer people are, and just the it's endless right now. And eventually we're going to kick back.
And then in that kind of same idea where like Trump supports his supporters and doesn't support those other people, you look at the way ICE is interacting, and like they've been in Massachusetts, they've did all that bullshit in LA, they're going to all these places, these blue run cities. But meanwhile, they're not going to the farms in the Midwest. And there's also some troubling news around that. There was a Trump official who was like, yeah, you have to understand, like, a lot of those farmers have been working with these technically illegal immigrants for decades now, and they know them. We're going to do a special thing where they're allowed to stay and the farmers are their keepers. And I'm like,
yeah, they said owners at one point.
What?
Indentured servitude.
Indentured servitude, slavery. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And it is slavery.
Yeah.
But how is it any different than what they've been working under? Because there was always the fear of, if you know you're undocumented and you're working and living in this country, you always live with that moment of someone outing you.
Yeah.
And finding out you're undocumented and wanting to use that as a weapon against you.
Or the people who you're working for who know you're undocumented.
Well, exactly. So I'm not sure that this actually changes the lived experience of the immigrant workforce on those farms as much as it changes our society's view of how we're allowing that to happen while somehow not getting the person in trouble who's hiring a bunch of undocumented workers. That's the part that really is extra white. This thing where people who hire undocumented workers bear no burden from committing a crime. And the only burden is, and those same people are often employers who are charging taxes, quote unquote, to their immigrant workforce and then pocketing those taxes.
But in the news this past week was what the Republican Party and Trump and the people who made it are referring to as Alligator Alcatraz.
With no iron, like the way they're saying it is
they're selling merch. But basically the idea of Alligator Alcatraz is like partly open air prison in the Everglades of Florida that was like constructed with a moat around it that obviously because of its location will be soon filled with hundreds of alligators. And the reason they're referring to it as Alligator Alcatraz is because Alcatraz in the Bay Area in California was known to be an inescapable prison because it was on an island. And an interesting fact about it was that it was one of the only prisons that had hot water for the longest time for the inmates. And that is because they didn't want to only give them cold water because they thought they'd be able to acclimate to the cold water and then they would be able to swim. I think it cost around $260 million to create. They built it in 8 days. It's just so sad to see that amount of money in that amount of time. I'm like, could we not have spent that amount of money in that amount of time to house homeless people or build domestic violence shelters? But the thing about this and the reason—
who would you be scaring if you did that?
Literally.
Nobody.
But I think the reason why they were able to build it so quickly is because the cruelty is built into the design. It is in the Everglades of Florida with no air conditioning or HVAC. So it's going to be about 100 degrees with 100% humidity. It is not sealed off to the elements. So as these people are being put in chain link cages inside, they are going to probably have hundreds of mosquito bites a day.
Ugh.
The more I think about the actuality of the experience of these people in this place is crazy.
It's a level of cruelty towards other human beings that can only be signaling the collapse of a society.
Yeah.
Like there are some telltale signs that things aren't going well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is rounding up a bunch of people, putting them in cages and watching them suffer. And more importantly, we've been trained by our own prison system for this, building a society of people who are so detached and disassociated from the lived experience of other people that we can go through our day-to-day life. Like I've been struggling, full disclosure, like the last 2 weeks, and just the general how fucked up it all feels right now. Like it just all feels very fucked up. And I don't know what it is one should do. I really, as someone who feels like they do a lot of good work to help people and like feels like it's getting to a point now where like the cruelty is so extreme. You try to go beyond the self-absorbedness of like, I'm just going to keep my head down and do my own thing. But like, that's kind of the only thing that is going to keep people alive pretty soon.
Yeah. I mean, people in the United States are like taught to dehumanize these people. Most of the people who villainize immigrants don't know any.
No.
And that is how they are able to compartmentalize and make them into these monsters in their head. But anyone who lives in a world that is representative of the world I live in knows queer people, knows trans people, knows immigrants, knows all of these people. And it sounds so reductive, but like, and then you realize they're fucking people just like you. Hopes, dreams, family, loved ones, trying to put food on the table. And it's so sad to see them victimized and villainized.
The one thing Americans have never had to be are refugees. And we're showing that. We're showing that as a country that we are one of the few places on this earth that hasn't had a situation that has caused them to leave. And it's coming soon.
Right. And also so many people are like, well, my ancestors and relatives came here legally. And it's like, yeah, before 1930, there weren't any laws around coming into the United States.
But even people who are coming here legally.
Well,
I mean,
totally.
They're undoing all the legal pathways so that they can then go back and say that someone's illegal. And I mean, didn't Christine say that those were 65 million alligators that were going to get fed?
No, that was Laura Loomer, another.
They're all the fucking
complete
same.
monster with a jigsaw face.
What does she do?
She is a very far right wing personality, and she basically had a brief moment where she seemed to be in the ear of President Trump around him getting elected.
Okay.
But since then, because like even for Trump and the MAGA-ness of it all, she's too much. But she tweeted this past week and said, alligators' lives matters. The good news is alligators are guaranteed at least 65 million meals if we get started now. The fucking horrifying part of that is if you Google what is the Hispanic or Latino population in the United States, they say 65 million.
Exactly.
So that's literally what she fucking did.
Yes.
What a fucking monster.
Yeah. And yet, what's going to happen to her? Nothing.
Yeah. And also it's like, but like this is someone who is in the MAGA party. She's in with these people and she's saying this. And so next time you're like, oh, but it's the criminals. Oh, it's the people who came here illegally. It's like, no, it is brown people and all of them.
This is kind of an overriding umbrella thought about all of these things that are happening right now. And again, like, I told you I listened to the NATO guy who was like, hey, Trump should get credit for what he's doing with NATO and getting other countries to pay their fair share, et cetera, et cetera. When the big beautiful bill passed and everyone's like, this is clearly a money grab to billionaires and like our medical infrastructure is going to be decimated, right? Like rural community, we live in a rural community. For a second, as I often do when I'm being the devil's advocate.
That's your toxic masculinity.
It is my toxic masculinity, and that's okay. And I went, oh, okay, so maybe there's a bigger plan here. Because we would all agree that our healthcare is not great. And I think we as Democrats and leftists, people not on the right, need to acknowledge that it's insane that people pay $800 to $900 a month for not good healthcare.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. And so there's one part of me that goes, yes, break it. But how are you going to rebuild it? And this is, again, is the moment where it's all about fear. It's all about intimidation. It's all about taking things away. Because if there was a grand plan, if they're like, listen, we are giving billions of tax breaks to these people, but guess what they're going to do with them? They're going to build free health clinics in all these areas. No, right, exactly. But if not that, I'm literally trying to give people who voted for this a way to go to like try to understand how this made sense to them.
They're dumb people. And I will always say it. If you voted for Trump, you are a fucking idiot. And every time I said that, people are like, oh, but I voted for Trump. And I'm nope. You're a fucking idiot. Open your fucking eyes. Talk to your neighbors about their needs and vote for the politicians who want to make people's lives better, not make people's lives worse.
I think the key to being less stupid is what you said about talk to your neighbors. Get the fuck off the internet.
Thank you for listening to Queer Times on the Internet.
Stop regurgitating talking points that are handed to you. Have conversations with people in your community who may even be different. Can you handle it? Having a conversation with them in your community and hearing them out and recognizing their humanity, because the more we remove ourselves from each other's humanity, the easier it is to buy a shirt that mocks a concentration camp. The more comfortable you are buying a t-shirt and merchandise from a place that is only caging human beings who came here to try to feed their children, you're a fucking maniac.
Yeah.
And it's not okay. And guess what? It's not what Jesus would do.
Absolutely not.
It is not what Jesus would do. And I don't care who told you that that is what Jesus would do. That's not what Jesus would do. Jesus would not put a bunch of people into cages and then make t-shirts about how they'll get eaten by alligators.
Next week, we're going to talk about progressivism. And I think a lot of what we're talking about now is going to be covered in that episode as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Or at least for me.
The way the left eats itself?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've been out of the studio for a couple weeks, so thanks for being with us as we caught up on a few of the news stories that have happened over the last couple weeks.
Well, we got that Queerty list.
Oh my God, yeah. And a huge thank you to those over at Queerty for listing us as one of their 10 favorite new things.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
And if we are one of your 10 favorite new things, listen to it and tell your friends.
Yeah.
Just like, subscribe.
Yeah, if you're having a good time and liking us, please follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We love it when you share our stuff.
I love it when you share stuff. I love it when you listen. I really find that a lot of people stop me and say, hey, I'm really loving the podcast. And to those people, I say thank you and tell a friend. And that's what I say to everybody. It's like, just tell, because it's we are a grassroots little thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, we're recording here at the Provincetown recording studio. A big thank you to our producer, Chad, and a big thank you to all of our listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Queer is in.